Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tech and Beer, live again from the Steam Whistle Brewery in downtown Toronto, Ontario. It's fantastic to be here again. And this episode, we're talking to a marketing expert for the education sector, marketing lead for the education sector for Microsoft Canada, Cam Smith.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, Cam. Cheers.
Thanks for doing it at the Steam Whistle Brewery, too.
Well, you got to do it at the brewery, right? It's tech and beer.
I
So
love it.
you bring the tech, we bring the beer.
It's very cool. You got to take a brewery tour here as well if you haven't done it before.
Right, yeah, you were mentioning that. What's that like? Tell me about it.
Well, just like their tagline is do one thing really, really
Okay.
well. So they have a single beer that they make. So as you're going through...
Pilsner.
Yeah. It's a Pilsner. It's an awesome beer. And then you go on the tour and they'll kind of take you through the entire factory. And literally... what's interesting is anywhere you're going in the country and drinking a steam whistle, like that beer is pretty much made here.
Right.
In downtown Toronto. So
Excellent.
you would think it would be a little gimmicky, but they make everything here. So you go through this pretty interesting tour.
Yeah.
They actually have like headsets set up.
Okay.
So you kind of get, like, you can hear the tour guide as you're walking through the rafters
Yeah.
of the whole thing. It's really cool.
Excellent. And it's obviously just a great location to come and enjoy a couple of cold ones in the summer too.
Tons of fun.
Yeah.
I love stopping by here on a Saturday afternoon. If you're going to a Jays game, you can come
Right.
by and have a beer ahead of time.
Just across the road.
It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Really
Awesome.
cool location.
So tell me about yourself. You're with Microsoft.
Yeah.
What's your background?
So I've been sort of in training in technology and marketing for the past 10 years, most
Okay.
of my career. I've worked at Apple for a little bit at one point.
Okay.
I've worked with a lot of companies that work with Microsoft, and now I've been at Microsoft for the past couple of years working on education marketing, and basically spending all my time on the way in which Microsoft Canada's products show up and help within the education space in like K-12 and higher education as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's really exciting. It's one of those areas you get to work on with technology where you're really making a difference.
Right.
Like you're fundamentally arming people with the stuff
Yeah.
they need to learn more, to like be engaged more in the classroom, to expand the way they're using things in higher education for when they graduate and go to the workforce. So it's a really exciting area of technology to be in.
Yeah. And education in Canada is in my opinion, it's one of the areas or industries or sectors that really needs to benefit from technology more, right? It really needs to kind of dive in. I think it is slowly, but I mean, it's not a fast moving entity, right?
I think it's interesting because it's one of those things where you'll never quite move fast enough, I think, with
Right.
the changing pace of technology. Like when I get up there and present sometimes to audiences about the way in which education and technology and Microsoft work together, we throw up this slide, and a lot of people have seen this picture before, but it's like, hey, we're in the fourth industrial revolution right now, right? Like you had the first couple of industrial revolutions where you had steam engines, and then you had oil, and you had gasoline, and then you had the assembly line, and now we're in this sort of like fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
And education, just like every sector, is trying to keep up. And I don't think anyone can quite keep up fast enough, but education is the area where it's probably the most important for people to keep up and to like evolve and expand the way they're using technology in the classroom.
Well, it impacts the youth and the next generation of workers, right?
Yeah, that's right. One of the stats I read a little while ago was like 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 have not been invented yet.
Right.
That's a lot of jobs. And 2030 is like 11 years away.
Yeah.
So I hope that stat is wrong because that's an extensive amount of jobs.
That's a lot of jobs.
And all those jobs are going to involve using technology on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
So skilling up is a big part of Microsoft Canada's focus,
Yeah.
and especially in the education sector.
Well, so it goes back to like what people say now about every company is a tech company. Because technology is pervasive in so many industries.
Right.
Almost every industry leverages technology somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, the second you put a phone in everybody's hand, everybody that worked for a company became a technology company in one way or another.
Absolutely.
Right? When you look across every other industry out there and you look at how they're transforming and evolving, there's no scenario where you can't consider yourself a technology company. There's like another stat I love, and it says that there are actually more jobs outside of the tech industry than there are in the tech industry.
Okay.
And that means like manufacturing, healthcare, retail, oil and gas, you name it, government, education, you name it. And there are more jobs that require very, very well thought out ways in which folks are using technology than the actual technology sector itself now. 10 years ago, that was not the case.
Yeah.
So it's this really long kind of journey that I think all of us are on together.
Yeah.
In figuring out, where we plateau on the use of technology, and probably a lot of people say that AI is one of the plateaus that we're gonna kind of really well develop. Sort of like the smartphone plateauing now, and then you're looking at like AI plateauing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where does, and it starts with education. So how does Microsoft play in the education space? Give me some insight into that.
We have a lot of products and technology that can help on sort of the institutional side and then also on the classroom side.
Okay.
So like on the institutional side, we have great products out there that can help save everybody a lot of time. Like we have forms that you can make, we have the ability to aggregate data into single locations. We've got stuff like School Data Sync, Azure Active Directory, which are fancy things that help keep everybody's profile organized.
Right.
Like you think about an IT department trying to put laptops into the hands of a teacher and 20 students in a classroom, and you think 10 years ago. And that IT department would need to take all 20 of those laptops, install individual profiles on all of them, make sure that the permissions in the images were installed on those devices, and then make sure the right accounts are there, and then ship them over to the teacher. And now we have Windows Autopilot, and you can go and you can get that set up before the devices arrive, and then automatically add on all the permissions you need. And literally, what would have taken you 2 weeks can take you 24 hours now, right? So saving time on the institutional level is one side of it. And then saving time in the classroom and creating better learning outcomes is kind of that other side. So we have stuff like, simple applications that can make a big difference for a teacher in a classroom. One's called OneNote, and it's got a OneNote class notebook. And think of it like a real notebook, but every kid has their own tab in it, and kids can't get into each other's tabs. And the teacher can get into all the tabs.
Interesting.
And then there's this ability for the teacher to say, I'm going to make a quiz, and I'm going to build this quiz real quick in OneNote, and then I'm going to click a button and cascade it out to all those kids' tabs. And each kid can use like a smartphone, they can use a web-based browser, they can use a Windows device if they want to. They can all take that quiz, and then the teacher can click a button and then aggregate that data back. Versus creating the assignment, writing it out on paper, printing it out, handing it out to the kids, having them all take the time to do it, taking the pieces of paper back, marking them individually, adding up all the scores, handing it back to the kids the next day. Like 1/10 of the time now. And those are just two examples, but that's kind of how we look at technology, is it should enable people seamlessly to save time and create better outcomes for kids and for institutions.
Excellent. I love OneNote. I use it. Listen,
I have like 30 OneNotes.
Yeah, I've got like 10 lists of stuff that I've got a to do around the house list. I've got a shopping list, things I've got to think about next, goals, right? I don't get to all of them, but it's good to on any of the lists.
The graveyard of OneNote list on things you don't get done. You think it's like a simple program, right? Like a PowerPoint or an Excel, but when you think of like a teacher in high school that has 8 classes they have to take care of, and they have to create lesson plans based on curriculum, and then they have different kids in each semester in those classes. And think about the organizational requirements of a teacher just to run that. That's a lot of work. Not just like standing in front of a class and being a teacher, but the organizational side of that is an intense amount of work. And OneNote can really help like eliminate a lot of the legwork involved. Because now you're a teacher and each kid has their own tab. And when a new semester occurs, you simply make them a new tab. All their work can go in it. You don't have to rewrite out your lesson plans or reprint material. It's just copy and paste from the previous years. It's simple stuff that you wouldn't think makes a big difference, but it can make a huge difference in the way teachers save time.
Makes sense.
It's pretty cool.
A huge part of a teacher's job is coordinating and making sure everything's available at the right time and collating information back from the students. So that's awesome.
I mean, everybody has teachers that are like friends or family members, right? And what do all those teachers say when it comes to report card time? Right? They're working the weekends, they're staying late. And that's just like one example of where you rarely hear about all the extra work that teachers end up having to do on a regular basis. And so we like to think that technology that Microsoft has to offer can help in those types of areas.
So that's the teachers. How is it impacting the students?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there are so many conversations across Canada in how students and education and technology work together. I mean, there are some opinions out there that like students should have less devices in the classroom.
Right.
They're like, hey, is screen time a thing?
Yeah.
And should kids actually be in front of screens? And I have a presentation that I give sometimes where it talks about, you know, what's good screen time and bad screen time. Like I have a 3-month-old daughter at home, and I think you had said earlier you have a 3-year-old son at home, right?
Yeah.
So should they really be sitting down and playing Candy Crush? But if they're watching a YouTube video on how to build a robot,
Yeah.
are you okay with that? Is that good screen time or is that bad screen
Yeah.
time? And so the same thing like in the classroom with students is something that everyone's kind of looking at right now. And then you've got these sort of two parallel views where one is, hey, if it's not effective screen time, we shouldn't be using it. And the other one is like, this is an inevitability. There's
Right.
no way to stop this from happening. One way or another, you know, it's crazy to think now a student would show up to university and not have a computer with them all day, every day.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine sending your kid to university without a laptop? So imagine the inevitability of kids within K to 12 up until, or kindergarten all the way up until grade 12. Like, there's an inevitability that they're all going to have a device with them all day that they're learning on. And it's just a matter of time before that happens. And so the way that technology creates better outcomes for them is super important.
Yeah. Until we get to the time where it's you walk in a room and you say, hey, computer, access my files. Just like on Star Trek.
Oh man,
We were talking about that earlier. we can do it now already, right? We're there.
Do it now, yeah. You can say, like on a Windows device, you can say, hey, Cortana, can you look up a file and give it a name?
Yeah.
And she'll look up the files you have stored online and the ones you have stored on your computer. And she won't even look at the titles of the files. She'll look at the actual like words and descriptions within them and find all that stuff, right? That technology is not like super prevalent. It's not at the point of us using Alexa in our houses right now.
Not yet.
Not yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
Like having that interconnectivity between it is getting really, really close.
Yeah. Excellent. How about from so a lot of these tools that Microsoft have are kind of built on the Office 365 stack.
Yeah.
How about from a hardware perspective? Because Microsoft's got some great hardware nowadays. How's that playing into the education sector?
I mean, there's a couple ways that it does. Like for higher education students, there's the Surface device lineup, which is like a Microsoft first-party set of devices, and they're incredible. Like from an engineering perspective, from a visual arts perspective, there's so many things you can do with those devices. We also have like the low-cost Windows devices that are like spill-proof, ruggedized. Like one of my gimmicky demos is I'll take the device and I'll throw it on the floor, and then I'll take a glass of water and I'll pour it on the device, and it's totally fine. Yeah. It only ever broke one time, and I've done it like hundreds and hundreds of times.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. One time's good.
Yeah. But the idea is there are budget constraints when it comes to K-12 institutions being able to provide devices for their students. I mean, there's socioeconomic factors depending on where you go in Canada. So we've tried our best to make sure that we have sets of devices out there with our OEM partners that are super affordable and still powerful enough to do cool stuff on. And not just Microsoft technology stuff, like whatever you want to do. If you want to learn to start doing coding, if you want to deal with 3D images, whichever type of way you want to use that technology. I mean, our job is just to provide the platform that can help enable it, and that's what we try and do.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it is access to the right tools for both for teachers and for students to have access to the right tools so that they can use them however they need to, right?
Yeah.
And be flexible with them. So in what ways do you engage at an end user level with schools and educators and
me all the time.
Students? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm hanging out with a school board on Friday.
Okay.
I was with them the previous week. I just finished doing judging. I was one of the judges on the Mars case competition for McMaster University, where they did a case competition about selling Surface within the consumer space to students.
Okay.
So yeah, that's like I would hate to just kind of sit back. I'm in marketing, so I would hate to like sit back and be like, I think this is what people will care about. I'm much more concerned about hanging out with customers, with teachers, with administration, and with students, and figuring out like, where does our technology actually really make sense, and how does it show up, and how can we help you achieve your goals? Like that's ultimately what Microsoft is focused on within education. Like if the tech doesn't make sense for you, don't use it. Like, let's look at the goals that you have. How can we help you achieve them, and then where's some of our technology that can help along the way?
Yeah. So you mentioned OneNote earlier. And
Yeah.
gave a great example of that. Any other examples of the Microsoft platform that are used in a unique way in education?
Oh man, there are a ton of really cool examples. So there's Power BI as well. I don't know if you've heard of Power BI.
Absolutely.
It's part of like one of our suites that we have, and it's a component of what we call the modern workplace at M365.
Okay.
But it's the ability to kind of aggregate data and view it in sort of like a final format.
Okay.
And there's a lot of ways in which you can use that. It's just kind of like the final view of it. But when we start talking about machine learning and we start talking about AI and we start talking about saving time on the decisions you'd have to make on a regular basis, that is a platform that can really, really help. Like if you can start aggregating data in a safe and secure way that's very, very careful about student data, and turn it into a scenario where you can say, hey, in our school board, we have a problem with grade 6 math, and there's not a high enough like average within grade 6 math. And based off of all of this data that we're getting together, we can go and we can look at a chart and we can say, hey, like there's these 3 schools over here that there's a real problem, and we should probably go and talk to the teachers and figure out like what's the scenario there.
Yeah.
And then there's these 3 schools over here that have like a really high average in math. We should go learn some lessons from those guys. And instead of having to like sit and ponder where you go look for the answers, that type of technology sort of gives you the map to go and use, your emotional intelligence and your expertise as an educator or as an administrator to go kind of figure out where the answers are for problems that you have.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, it's all about the data and sifting through and picking out the right answers.
I think that's what it kind of comes down to, right? Like a lot of people get worried about AI and the way that it's being used. But there's a leadership team member at Microsoft Canada that has this really interesting analogy, because we talk about kind of AI and data and how it's being used, and people get worried that it's going to take everybody's jobs away, and that becomes a concern at times. And you have like automatic checkouts at the grocery store now. But he has this really, really interesting analogy, and it's about New York in the early 1900s and horses. And his analogy is, you used to have people whose entire industry was built around the horse, right?
Right.
Like horseshoeing, cleaning up horse poop on the streets. That was a massive industry. It employed thousands and thousands of people. And none of those jobs exist anymore. But in their place, 50 years later, is an automotive industry.
Right.
With a massive amount of jobs behind it. And so the really cool thing, and one of your colleagues said earlier, how do we get to Star Trek, which is something I always care about, is, AI and data and the aggregation of data is going to allow us to not worry about those small details anymore and focus on bigger and better things like student outcomes and individual learning styles, right? And I think the analogy finishes with like, we don't have to clean the poop off the streets anymore.
Right.
Which is really
Thank
cool.
goodness. Yeah. It's a blessing. And you know what? Like you touched on something there at the end about, student styles and teaching. We were talking about this a little bit earlier off camera about how, there's so many different types of student, right?
Yeah.
I mean, boy, girl, different backgrounds, different skill levels, different ways of learning. Is there a way that AI and some of Microsoft's machine learning platforms can help those kind of students?
Yeah, kind of. Like I think there's really something to be said about the power of the teacher and what they bring to the table and how important they are, like the role that they play.
Absolutely.
Because you can have all the technology in the world, but when the door to the classroom closes and the teacher's standing in front of their 30 students, AI can go so far, but it cannot tell you the emotional components of those individual students and what they're learning. It can't tell you that maybe they don't have as strong of a support system at home.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're coming from a brand new school and they're having trouble making friends, and so it's harder for them to concentrate in class. So AI can really, really help inform the decisions, but then really great teachers are ultimately what makes the difference.
Right.
And then when you think about those individual learning styles in the classroom, that teacher needs to kind of assess them. And that's where technology can help by offering different mediums and different modes of learning based off like kinesthetic or auditory or visual learners, people with different learning abilities. But the teacher's kind of front and center of that. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the importance, my mom was a special education teacher for like 30 years.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so
you've got some insight.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of insight. I mean, I'm not a teacher, so I only have so
Yeah.
much insight. But she did it for a very long time,
Yeah.
and she learned a lot about the individual learning styles of different students. And when you show her, when I showed her some of the tech that we have, she was like, "This would be amazing if this existed while I was
Yeah.
a teacher." She's retired now, but it made a big. She said it would have made a very big difference with how she could enable different students' learning styles within the classroom.
Wow. Yeah. Excellent. Interesting. So, if I was a school today or an educator today, what should I be looking at for my students? What are the kind of things I should be thinking about as I procure technology, or not even procure it, but help direct my students to technology, or how do I use it in the classroom?
Yeah, I think that you shouldn't be afraid of new technology, right? That's one of the biggest fears. Like in society right now, there's fear of AI and what that's going to look like. In the classroom, there's fear of all of this technology coming in and teachers not quite knowing how to use it compared to their students.
Right.
Minecraft, for example, is a great example of this. So Minecraft Education Edition, Microsoft owns it, and teachers kind of get worried that, okay, I'm going to use this game in my classroom, use gamified learning, and I don't know the first thing about Minecraft Education Edition. And these kids know everything about it. As soon as I put them in the game, they're able to just go off and run.
Yeah.
And so as teachers kind of look at how they're incorporating new technology into the classroom, I think the biggest thing is to not be afraid of it. And most teachers aren't, but all of us have a bit of a fear of new technology. So if you think of Minecraft and using that in the classroom, you don't need to know how to play Minecraft to use it as a tool within your classroom.
Okay.
Like if you want your grade 8 class to learn about the Great Pyramids of Egypt, you go and assign the class a task of learning about the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Write a report on the history of the Great Pyramids. Tell me how they were created. Tell me what times in history they were created. Then go and diagram me out, thinking like one block in Minecraft is like 1 meter in real life. How many blocks do you need to go build the Great Pyramids? Wow. And then only after you've done all of those things, I'm going to hand you a computer. No idea how to play this game, but I'm going to let you go build the Great Pyramid of Egypt in Minecraft, take a picture of it, and include that in your final report. And there's not a kid on the planet that's not going to say, I get to play Minecraft at the end of this. Of course I'll go do the report. Yeah, so it's just one example. But teachers don't really need to, you don't have to totally understand the technology or know it better than the people you're enabling to use it. You're the facilitator of how it's being used.
And one of my past guests brought that point up too, that teachers are sometimes afraid because they feel like the students know more than they do about technology. So it's like, well, how can I teach these kids something when they're using stuff that I don't know how to use? So, so it's a balance. It's good that you kind of raise that point. You don't have to know more than the child about, or more than the person you're educating about the technology. You just have to know how to use it and how to say, hey, go and do this.
That's right. Yeah. I mean,
this is the point of what we're trying to do. Use this tool that we've got, because that's what technology is.
That's exactly what it is. It's a tool, and you're never going to know how to use it better than everybody else out there. No. There's always going to be somebody better than you. So just knowing that, it's a tool in your toolbox, and how you want to hand that tool to somebody.
Right.
That's the decision that you have with technology. It's not necessarily knowing how to use the tool better than the person you're handing it to.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for the use of technology in education. I mean, in every industry right now. It's like I said, the fourth industrial revolution a little while ago. There's a lot of ambiguity surrounding how all of this is going to kind of hit that plateau, so to speak, and when the technology is going to kind of like level out, and we're going to see sort of the next level of how it's being used.
It'll be interesting because it's happening so fast.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. It used to be predictable, like you could kind of, but now it's happening so fast. You're like predicting it, and then the next day it's happening, which is kind of cool. It's kind of exciting, right, for those watching and those that are in it.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of, well, okay, how do you plan ahead? What do I plan for 2 years from now?
Right.
Well, it's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible, and there's so many examples in history of like how that happened, and that people felt unprepared, and that things kind of generally worked out in the end. Like the Great Canadian Railroad, for example. That was built as the track. Someone made a decision to lay the tracks that built Canada, and then as the tracks were being laid, all the cities the tracks were connecting to were trying to figure out what that meant for them as individual cities, right? The increase in travel, the increase in goods and supplies. And that came up way faster than people thought it would.
Yeah.
But it ultimately made the country what it is today. And that's a basic example, but it's generally the same thing. Like, you can't be afraid of the future. You've got to sort of embrace it in the right way.
It's happening anyway,
Yeah,
right? So it's going to happen.
anyway.
So yeah. So if there was a kind of a final kind of thought or point you'd like to make about education and Microsoft and what you guys are doing, what would it be?
I think it's just
What would be the key thing?
yeah, technology is like Microsoft thinks that technology is a tool to help enable incredible teachers, like smart students and innovative administration and staff to do great things.
Yeah.
And our technology is a tool to help along the path to achieve the goals that they're looking for. And that's ultimately what we care about doing.
Right.
Like, if we're building the right technology for helping education achieve its goals, we're thrilled by that. And how can we help make sure that you're using it in a way that you find effective within your
Right.
institutions, whether they're like a university or whether it's a K-12 school board in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately where we're focused on, and we want to help in any way that we can get there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh,
it's
thanks
been
for
a
having
great
me.
time's just flown by.
Yeah, it's the first interview I've done while I've drank beer.
Isn't it the best way to do it?
This is a great way to do an interview.
Like,
yeah.
almost everything is made better when you're drinking beer.
I mean, I can't
Almost,
argue with
yeah.
that. Especially at the Steam Whistle Brewery.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you've got to come and check this place out if you haven't already.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely awesome. So well, thanks very much.
Yeah,
it's
it's my
been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll be talking again sometime. And
Anytime.
thanks everybody for tuning in again. This is the second episode from the Steam Whistle, and who knows, we might be back here again in the future. Thanks a lot. See you next time.